Hello. I too would like to thank the organizers of the exhibition and the conference. It's been super interesting up till now, and I'm really glad that I decided to make the trip to Taiwan. I'm enjoying it a great deal. I hope my talk will be as interesting. I'll talk a bit about the project that's exhibited upstairs in the exhibition, and it's really there's two things I'd like to say in advance. One is that it's really a research project, which I imagine is most of the projects that are exhibited here are similar in that sense, but I find that it keeps changing all the time, and my definition of it keeps changing all the time. And so actually what's presented here is not how I see it. What I presented here and what I made a year ago is not actually how I would define it today, and not along the lines of what I would define it today. But I think what I'll do is I'll say how I saw it when I made it and the way I saw it, and then I'll go back a little bit and explain the process up to there, and then how I see it today. And also the second thing I'd like to say is that I guess it's obvious, but I feel in a way out of context. Earlier you were talking about regionalism and culture and that prism and so forth. So in a way, in that prism, I feel also a little bit out of context, but also out of discipline in a way, because I think that the work talks about industrial design and belongs to the field of industrial design even more than the field of craft, and I feel that even more seeing it in the exhibition here. It gives me a different perspective on the project. So the way I was defining the project to myself while I was making it is to create a collaboration between the 3D software I was using to design and the ceramic material, trying to create a sort of common language between the two, and sort of common line of thought between the two, in which they both think together in a way. And coming from the design discipline, so we use a lot of 3D CAD software to create the forms, and mostly what 3D software, the way it thinks is through mathematical vectors, which are basically straight lines. So when you come to design a really curvaceous object in a 3D program, what you're actually doing is making a lot of small straight lines all in relation to each other to create something that looks like a curve. And I chose for this project a really simple, basic 3D program called SketchUp. At the time it was Google SketchUp, now it's Trimble SketchUp. It's bought by a company or sold by Google, I don't know exactly. But it's a really simple and free 3D designing software, mostly targeted at architects, and it allows working with these straight vectors in a really, not in a really, the work is really done through line. Through creating lines, you create a bunch of lines, and then you get a plane, a flat plane, and then you put a bunch of flat planes together, and you get something that looks like a volume, which is actually a bunch of straight lines that are each composed relative to each other. And the software was, I really enjoyed working with it because I feel that it's sort of an honest way to approach this beginning collaboration between the 3D program and ceramics, in the sense that it's the most honest form of a 3D program, the simplest, basic form of 3D program, and it's really interesting to see what that ceramic makes of the program and what the program makes out of the ceramics. And also, alongside that is a sort of a research regarding the the surface pattern or ornament that's supposed to work with this kind of computerized design in ceramics. So this is actually part of a small exhibition I did at a Paul Smith store in London a year and a half ago. These are all in line with this kind of definition of project. And this is actually a side project of my studio, which mostly I produce. I have this line of architectural miniatures that I produce, which are mostly architectural miniatures from Tel Aviv and Israel, and some of them are international. And I produce them in my workshop. They're all slip cast in plaster molds and decals. And it's very laborious work. And after making several thousands of them, I got really tired of working with plaster molds and slip casting them. And then, on the other hand, that's the method I became really good at. So I started developing, I started thinking of other ways of relating to ceramics. And this is where I enrolled in a master's program at the B'Tzalel Academy of Art and Design in Jerusalem. And I started by looking at ceramics that I liked and trying to imitate them or copy them. I called it the Envy Project because I found that envy was a great deal of my motivation. And I started imitating, and I wanted to make things easy and fast and relating to ceramics without having to make all these positives and molds and investing all this work into making just one object. And so I explored a little bit working with formica and sort of imitating in other ways these objects and looking at ceramics that I really appreciated and liked that were mostly industrial ceramics. Also, I did a bit of imitating of, we call it Armenian patterns. It's actually, I think, Iznik from pottery from Turkey is where the patterns originate, but the Armenian community brought it to Israel when they were working on the Dome of the Rock, and then it became popular in Israel, and now it's kind of like an Israeli motif, although it's totally un-Israeli. And then I wanted to go back into ceramics and start making these imitations in ceramics where I controlled the shape a little bit more, but I really didn't want to get back to the positives and plasma and so forth. I sort of invented this fast method of making a cardboard model and then casting the ceramic into the cardboard model, and then I would get this really fast shape in a day to make several objects. And this is the first collection in this line, the first sort of test collection that I made. And it took a while to figure out all the technical issues. It took a long while to figure out all the technical issues. Eventually, in my thesis project, I presented these molds that were 3D designed on a computer, unfolded on the computer, laser cut out of the cardboard, and then in my studio folded and recast to create the shapes. And I also discovered along the way that if I printed onto the flat cardboard engobe or underglaze, that casting would copy this pattern into the clay, which is a really cool way of creating these patterns into the object. And so, a little side segue, because I have to mention something political, because I'm from Israel, is that I used this project also. At the time, it was Google SketchUp, and it was possible to pull models out of Google Earth into this 3D program and use them freely, basically. And so I pulled all the buildings in Gaza from Google Earth, which was only a handful of buildings at the time. It's a little bit more than this. I think there were 6 or 7. And I reproduced them with this method using digital details, and basically doing very, very little design work, just using the information from Google and interpreting it into my process. So this is the wrong movie, so I'll just keep going. No, this is the wrong, this is supposed to be in the end. And also one more technical thing is that I discovered also that I could, while I was laser cutting these molds for the objects, I could laser etch the pattern into the mold and get pattern relief, which I later used in collaboration with color and tests with cobalt to create basically white patterns over a blue background. White laser etched patterns, relief patterns. And there's a whole series of experimentations into the density of the design of the pattern and trying to create different variations and so forth. This at this point, I really started defining it as an equal amount, ceramics and equal amount 3D design. Both interested me very much in the change that occurred in the ceramics between the two. Interested me, but after this Biennale, I started looking back at my CAD programs, and the program I was working with, Google SketchUp, it has two major qualities for me. One is that really you work with very basic geometric shapes. You start forming out of really basic geometric shapes like squares and rectangles, and then you slowly start manipulating the shape to get more evolved form. And another really important thing for me is that I figured out, unlike all other 3D programs I've ever worked with, is that I could work the way I wanted to work in ceramics. I could make something, I could make a form, and then instead of manipulating that form and changing it forever, if I liked it, I could duplicate it, keep the form that I liked, start working on the new form and manipulate it and duplicate it, which I think anybody who's ever worked with material ever has wanted to do. It's a sort of a save-as process. You save your former thing that you liked before you start manipulating it. And I discovered that I started getting these shapes of these evolution files in the program, and I look back. These are not manipulated for the presentation. I mean, I look back at my files and realized that they in themselves were really interesting as this idea of line of thought, as a way to. They're actually a document of the way I was thinking when I was designing the object. So the object might only be one of these things along the way, but the file contains a whole interesting document. And I started working. With that in mind. I've been working lately on not saving the files so quickly and putting them aside, but really trying to retain the thought process as I work and keeping all the objects and images along the way. And actually, I'm right now in 2 weeks, the local Israeli biennial is opening as well, and I said that too soon. So basically, I started looking not at objects, but in order to see an object in this space, you need to kind of look at the step before the object and the step after the object and make a comparison between the three. So one object is in fact three in this sense. So here it's supposed to be. And for the Tel Aviv Biennial, I actually decided not to make any ceramic objects at all. Not in the traditional sense. I made ceramic objects in this 3D environment, And sort of like the Walter Benjamin's Angel of History, you're moving into the future, looking at the past. So you see everything that's output out of this design process behind you. And I hope I didn't race through everything too fast. But thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.